This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders who are building the future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and I am back with Rick Ford. We've been talking about his new book, The Growth Capital Playbook, and the incredible journey that took him from gas station kid to building one of the largest privately held automotive groups in America. Last time, we focused on the grit, leadership lessons, and culture that helped Rick build RFJ Auto Partners. Today, we're diving into growth capital, the mega merger with Sonic Automotive, the emotional reality of life after the deal, and how Rick is now approaching investing, mentorship, legacy, and what it really means to build something that lasts. Rick Ford, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
Doing great today. Thank you so much, Joe.
It's great to have you back here, Rick. And so, part one was a very intensive conversation about automobiles and how you was the self-proclaimed gas station kid to running your own business to then owning your own business. And now we want to get into sort of like the second part of your life. And that's, how you built RFJ into this behemoth where it got so big, you had to merge with somebody else. It's the kind of the second entrepreneur's conundrum. One is find a problem, fix a problem. The second is like, how do I grow my company? Do I take on investors? Do I merge with someone? Let's get into that part of the career of RFJ. When did you see sort of that light, not at the proverbial end of the tunnel, but like that light where you're like, hey, listen, we've gotten to this level where we've either got to bring in people or we got to merge with someone. Tell me about that point in the life cycle of RFJ.
Good question, Joe. So the short answer is we were not looking to have an exit event at the time we did. We were coming out of COVID. We'd come through, what was some of the more challenging times for all businesses across the United States. You think about COVID, how it literally shut down businesses and some never recovered. We were coming out of that. And it was a really good time for the auto industry. The business was growing. Our margins were great. We came out of a difficult time and we're really, on another an uprise in the industry as a whole, and RFJ especially was doing well. So I wasn't looking for an exit at the time. It came about by, and I talk about this in my book, there was a gentleman that had worked for me years ago, reached out to me. He was working for a very prominent business investor who happens to own a couple of dealerships in Houston. And he reached out to me. He said, Rick, he said, my partner is interested in seeing if perhaps there's a possibility that you would consider selling us RFJ. And so we engaged in having those conversations. And what I've learned over my years is that business, regardless of what business you're in, it's a very small, insulated group, right? Everybody knows everybody. And what was interesting about it was, as we're having these conversations about how would it fit, what would it look like if he were to buy RFJ, he reached out to a friend of his that he wanted to ask about RFJ, who's in the industry. Just so happens that person was Jeff Dyke, president of Sonic Automotive. And so he reached out to Jeff, said, Jeff, I'm talking to these guys, this Rick Ford guy at RFJ, thinking about getting really big. And this particular person I'm talking about, he already owned a couple of dealerships in Houston, but they were very different than ours in that they were in what we call the super highline or exotic car portion. So different to what we were very much a blue collar company, Ford, Chevy, Chrysler, Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Hyundai, Kia. That was our bread and butter, our volume stores. Lexus, I don't want to forget about Lexus, but as those talks progressed and we, got to know each other a little bit better, it became obvious to both of us that it really wasn't the fit for him and what he wanted to do, nor for RFJ, because we were just so different, from selling, Bentleys and Rolls Royce and Lamborghini or, whatever else he happened to sell, some other that were even further exotics that I won't mention here. From selling those to selling Ford and Chevy, it was a very different model and a very different, just different business than what he was used to. And but at the time, whenever he called Jeff to ask him about RFJ, see what Jeff knew, ask about me, Jeff said, well, this is what happens. I know him very well. We had been friends and had worked together for years, been friends for 20 years. And so, Jeff gave him his insight. I don't know for sure exactly what Jeff said, but obviously I would hazard a guess. He probably said good things about us, but it just wasn't a fit. And so now fast forward 30, 60 days, and I get a call from my good friend, Jeff Dyke. He said, hey, Rick, by the way, so-and-so called me, was asking about you, and I didn't know that you were thinking about selling RFJ. Well, I really wasn't trying to sell it, but we're always open to the right conversation, and so that's why we started having that conversation. He said, "Well, would you be interested in having that same conversation with us if Sonic were interested in acquiring RFJ?" I said, "Absolutely, I would be open to that." And frankly, because of my close relationship with Sonic from having worked there for years before, my close relationship with Jeff Dyke, and my relationship with the Smith family, who I have tremendous respect for. The Smith family is the controlling interest and the founders of Sonic Automotive. And so I couldn't have found a company that I was more comfortable with. And when I talk about comfort, I'm not talking about just can they write the check, because they're a public company. That wasn't going to be an issue. They could raise the capital. They had cash. None of those issues were playing. But was it going to be the right fit from a culture standpoint? Were they going to embrace the people I had and really continue to allow my people to grow, allow our company to continue to grow and become something that would have a long-term future? And I felt like Sonic was the right fit from a culture standpoint. And by the way, we started talking in August or September of 2021, and we closed the deal in December of 2021.
Wow.
So it's unbelievable that we were able to get it done that fast, and turned out to be, one of the better decisions that we ever made. And again, all credit goes to the folks at Sonic. They were able to move quickly, and the level of comfort we had on both sides is really what sealed the deal for me. The level of trust that I had with the team at Sonic, and then likewise, the team at Sonic had a great level of trust with us and with me, and so that really made things go smoothly.
That's awesome. I love to ask Rick the sliding doors question. If that mogul had never reached out to you, do you see this relationship? I mean, obviously, you had a pre-existing relationship with Jeff and Sonic, but could you have seen that happening had not that mogul come in and be like, "Hey, like what you guys are doing over there"? I mean, do you think about that kind of thing? Like, would you have gotten to where you are now had that guy not picked up the phone and even just like shown an interest?
That's a great question, Joe. The short answer is I've never really thought about it in depth in that way. That's a great thought. I would tell you just my initial reaction is there's a good chance we never would have gotten there, because Sonic and Jeff would not have known that we were even considering it. So it never started the conversation. Um, and now, would we have eventually exited anyway? Yes.
Sure, you're
We
not
would
here forever.
eventually, that's right.
You're
We
not
knew that
immortal, so yeah.
we knew that that we would have had an exit event, and that's part of it. With our investor, they were looking to have an exit event at some point anyway, in our partnership. But would it have happened then? Probably not. Would it have happened to Sonnet? Probably not. It just was good fortune that someone reached out. We engaged in those conversations, and those conversations led us to where we ended up with our relationship with Sonic and with Jeff Dyke.
That's pretty cool. And Rick, it's, if you were to look up car guy in the dictionary, there'd be a picture of Rick Ford. I mean, through and through, like the automotive industry is like ingrained into your DNA. But then later in life, you develop the Ford family investments and you get into the investment side of things. What brought that on? And at what point in the timeline did that come along? And why choose that? Because like I said, car guy. If you told me, hey, I went and started another automotive company, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. That tracks for Rick Ford, but to go into investments, why that?
Well, there's a couple of reasons, Joe. Number one, first and foremost, I didn't start Poor Family Investments, our family office, until we had the Sonic agreement signed,
Okay.
sealed, and delivered. Until I had a capital cash inflow, I had to decide, okay, what do I do with this capital? That's number one. And so that was really part of it. Number two, a big part of it was I was truly intrigued, is that 10 plus year relationship that I had with my private equity partner. I learned more and more about what they did and who they were and how they truly helped other businesses and helped other entrepreneurs exceed beyond their wildest dreams as levels of success that they couldn't have done on their own. That really intrigued me, and I thought to myself, "There's something here that I enjoy that I think I could do and be able to help others, reach their goals and reach their success." And so that intrigued me. And then number three, from a practical standpoint, I had a agreement, as I mentioned, a 2-year transition period with Sonic. and I had a 5-year non-compete after that.
Okay. So that
So
explains
for
Rick no
7
longer being
years,
a car guy. Yes. Okay.
that's right. So for 7 years, I couldn't buy a dealership if I wanted to. And I want to point out, could you find a way to get around the non-compete? Probably, but I didn't want to do that. I have such respect for the people at Sonic that I wanted to honor our agreement and every part of that agreement, not just to the letter, but even the intention of the agreement, because I wanted to do the right thing, because they were more than fair with me, and I wanted to make sure that I did exactly what they expected me to do going forward, even long after we'd been paid, long after we got every dollar. I just wanted to make sure I honored the agreement that we made and honored, the respect and the relationship that I had with the folks at Sonic. And so that's why I've not ever considered getting back in it. And I've had several friends and several people ask me either come invest, come partner with them, come buy a dealership. I had several OEMs come to me and say, "Hey, Rick, let's get you back into the group." But the short answer is I just can't. So I've scratched that itch in a couple of different ways. Um, I have, I think I mentioned to you, I have a tractor dealership that my oldest son, we have a couple of different tractor lines that he operates. We now have 4 power sports dealerships, which are, we have Kawasaki, we have Polaris, we have Can-Am, we have Yamaha, and we sell, enthusiasts in power sports products. And we also have a couple of boat lines where we sell boats dealership as well. So we dabble in things that are not specifically automotive, but are similar to that business in auto, but they're just not. I would always honor my agreement with Sonic, so completely stayed away from new car dealerships and even used car dealerships.
That's great. You mentioned your son there, and if we don't mind, like taking a couple steps back, because you talked about this merger with Sonic and where you left it. I know for a lot of people, once they build a business, there is this sort of like familiar, and I mean literally like family line that they want to be like, hey, this is going to be in the family's name for the rest of life. A family member, the son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter is going to eventually take over this company and ride it into the sunset. Was that ever part of the equation? Was there an idea? Because you see that sometimes even like, I mean, just I think for more lay people, like a professional sports team where like it'll be the father bought the team 20 years ago, then the son or daughter takes it over, and then their son or daughter takes it over. So you see this lineage, and very rarely do you ever see people like relinquish these things because they're so important to the family. Was that ever part of the discussions, Rick?
For me, the answer is no, Joe. And I thought about it. Don't get me wrong. I thought about it long and hard. And I would tell you that there's been plenty of research done about the success of second and third generation business owners. And especially in the automotive industry, that level of success is very diminishing.
Really?
Typically, the
Okay.
second generation, only about 50% of the second generation are successful, continue to do well. And third generation drops down to like 20%.
Wow. Why do you think, Rick? I
Yeah.
mean, obviously it's probably anecdotal. Why do you think that happens?
There's hundreds and hundreds where you
Yeah.
can't paint one
Yeah.
broad brush, but I would tell you that part of it is oftentimes, especially as a car dealer, our children go on and get better educations than what we had. They experience a very different life than what we had when we were growing up. They're exposed to different things, and so oftentimes they're not forced to start at the very bottom and work their way up. Right? They start, unfortunately, oftentimes at a much higher level than what we ever thought of, and so they really don't. Oftentimes, most of those first, second generation dealers don't really um, experience the what it takes to bootstrap it and be successful from the ground up. That's number
Uh,
one. By the second generation or third generation, it's even more extract, but they're so far from the founder and the founder mentality and that growth mentality that it's even harder for that third generation to be
wow.
successful. Not to say it doesn't happen. I've got
Yeah.
good friends that are second and third generation dealers that are really good. But it's harder and harder for that as you go down that line because, again, the other thing that happens, especially in the automotive industry, I can't speak to every industry, but certainly in automotive, it's a very time intensive business. When I was working, growing up in the business, I worked. Now we were forced in Texas. We had what they call a blue law, so we were closed on Sunday.
Oh,
You
yeah.
had to be
Well, I
closed on
grew up in
Sunday.
Jersey, so we had those in Bergen County, so very aware of that. And also, I'm sure for people who aren't from that area, it's very confusing. Wait, I can't buy something on a Sunday, but yes, that law still exists in Bergen County, New Jersey, where all the stores are closed. So, yeah, totally familiar with the blue laws.
So it still exists in Texas, but only to certain industries,
Right.
automotive being one of them. But other states, you go to California, you go to a multitude of other states, you can be open 7 days a week.
Yeah.
So there are some states that are very common to be open 7 days, some that are only 6 days. But either way, in the auto industry, especially when I started in the early days, we typically worked all 6 days out of the week. And for me, growing up in the business, I worked on average 12, 14 hours a day. And so there wasn't a lot of time to do other things. And so my children watched that growing up and they thought to themselves, wow, there's got to be an easier way to make a living to working 12, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. This doesn't look like fun to me. And now, ultimately, my two oldest, I have three children. My two oldest ones both ultimately ended up in the automotive industry. The first one didn't think he wanted to. He went and branched out on his own for the first several years out of school. And then ultimately came back whenever he got married, had children, and said, "Okay, Dad, I'll never forget him coming to me and said, okay, I need a real job now." And he was fishing on the professional bass tour. And it's a hard way to make a living if you haven't ever
Sure.
done it. But anyway, he came back to me and said, okay, I need a real job. And so he came back and went into the car business. But I made him start at the lower levels. He started, well, he started all my children started very early in the car business and inside the dealership, working in very, beginner level jobs,
Yeah.
work
Well, that's
stocking in
probably why they didn't
parts.
like the industry, Rick. You made it too hard for them. They're like, "Wait a minute, can't you just give me the office next to yours, the one with the glass on with the air conditioning? I don't like this other stuff."
You're probably right. I did make it harder for them because I didn't want them to think that they were just gonna walk in all of a sudden they're the boss.
Right.
Uh, but they both went away and then came back. Now the middle child, he always knew that he wanted to be in the car business, but then as he got into it, he worked in the business through high school and college. Uh, as he learned more about it, he's like, "I don't think I wanna be on the retail side." And so he ended up matriculating to the auction side of the business.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, right? But looking at it, I knew my oldest son had 0 desire to run the overall group. He moved into a position when we at RFJ where he was over our parts of service business, and he ultimately got tired of the travel. He got tired of, just everything that goes on with managing such a large enterprise. And so he told me, Dad, he said, I would love for you to have all the success in the world, but me running RFJ is never going to happen. It's not what I want to do." Middle son said, "Dad, I don't wanna be, the retail business. It's I enjoy being in the business, but I don't wanna be doing what you do. That's not gonna happen." And my daughter, frankly, was still at college, so she was too young, and she had actually moved towards the finance side. My daughter has a finance degree and worked for a family office during college, during her summer internships. And so she was moving towards the finance side and really didn't have any desire and to tell you because her mother and I were both in the business together. And she would just flat out tell you, I have 0 desire to be in the car business, none. And so she always knew that that was never going to. So I didn't really have a future lineage that had an interest.
Okay.
And a lot of business owners, it doesn't matter if you're in the car business or any other business, they're and one thing they you always learn, you have to learn, sometimes the hard way, is you can't force your children to want to be in the business you're in.
Right.
They either have to, and if you force them to do it, if you force them to take over, and this has been well documented, books, movies, you name it. But when you force your children to follow in your footsteps and to take over the family business, oftentimes it's not a positive experience for you or for them. They've got to really want to do it. I mean, being an entrepreneur is hard.
Yeah.
And I tell people, and I talk about this in the book all the time, being an entrepreneur is not for everybody. You're unfortunately always, you're the last one to get paid, number one. You got so much responsibility. In my case, and I used to talk to my management team about it, we didn't have just 2,000 people that depend on us, our 2,000 employees. If you really think about it, we had 2,000 families. So if you average 3 people in the family, now you got 6,000 people you're responsible for. But it doesn't stop there. In the average car dealership, you've got 30, 40, 50 different vendors that you work with all day, every day that depend on your business to make them their business successful, whether that be selling your parts, selling different products and services, et cetera, that depend on car dealerships to be successful. And so your reach, if you think about RFJ, what we were doing, not only do we have 6,000 family members, but then all the various people that interacted with our dealerships, it was realistically 10, 12, 15, 20,000 people that we have an impact on in their lives. That's a lot of responsibility for anyone. And if you're not an entrepreneur that embraces that level of responsibility, it could be stifling to you. Sure, this question about, why did I not just transition to my children? Frankly and honestly, they didn't want it. They didn't want to try to run this company. They didn't want that pressure, that stress. Now, have they gone on to now be successful entrepreneurs on their own? Sure, yes, they have, and I'm proud of them. But in the different industry and in different levels and different sizes. My oldest son has two dealerships, and he's perfectly happy. We talked about it. We've had people come to us and want to sell us other dealerships so he can grow. And he says to me, Dad, I'm not interested in growing. I want to continue to make these two the best I could possibly be. And I don't have to get on an airplane. I don't have to drive 2 hours to go check on the store. I don't have to do any of those things. I can spend my time right here with my family and with my business and the people that I work with. And I'm happy. My middle son, middle child, he now has 3 dealerships and he is growing. He'll continue to grow. I don't think that he'll ever grow. We've talked about it. I don't think he has any, at least today, he doesn't have ambitions to grow to the size that we were at RFJ. He certainly has ambitions to grow, but he really didn't want to be in the retail car business. He wanted to be in a different industry, and he's really embraced the power sports. And then my daughter, she works for our family office, and she really focuses on our finances. She manages our relationships with our private equity investments, with our venture capital investments, with our direct company investments. We're currently today invested in probably a dozen various companies. We're a direct limited partner, not counting what we're invested in with our venture capital and our private equity funds, but just direct investments for about a dozen. So she works in that part of our family office and really focuses all of her time on that, along with I can say now my grandson, who's almost a year. She's having a ball being a new mother. So she does that along with managing a lot of the financial side of our family office. And then my oldest son, middle son rather, who manages his 3 power sports stores. He also manages our real estate portfolio for our family office. So we've got our 40 or 50 piece of commercial real estate that we have. Part of it we developed, part of it we purchased and have long-term tenants in it. So he manages that as well. It's running his 3 power sports stores. So there's no shortage of things for my kids to do every single day.
That's awesome. Well, let's wrap this up on the kids note and the fact that you mentioned grandkids. When your grandkids are eventually old enough to read this book, and we know it's a little too early at this point, what do you hope they understand about you beyond the business success? What can they take away? Because I always find that fascinating about families. Like to this day, I'm a middle-aged man, and my mom's still telling me stuff like I didn't know happened in her life. So I still love learning about my mom. But what do you hope your grandkids learn from this book? Outside of obviously, we said very successful business person, but what else? What do you hope them to really take away from the book?
So my main motivation for this book was to be able to chronicle some things for my grandchildren and ultimately future generations to understand why we were successful, why they enjoy the level of success they're enjoying today and will continue to enjoy for years to come, thanks to the trust fund that I've set up for them. But the real thing that my motivation was to teach them that you can be successful by doing the right things, by treating people the right way, by consistently delivering on the promises that you make. Those are the things that I learned as a young boy, learned throughout my career. Being nice to people on the way up because the same ones you're going to meet on the way down. All those life lessons that I impart in this book are really what's more important. It's not about the success. They can see, they can read anywhere, how we sold the company and what have you.
Right.
That's really a byproduct of what was really important. What was really important is that we developed a culture, we developed a mindset in our company where we took care of everybody that we touched, both employees and customers. And we delivered on our commitments. Whenever we told a customer we were going to do something, we stood behind that commitment. When we told an employee or we promised an employee we would do something, we lived up to those commitments. And that's what's really important. I think some of that is lost in today's world, that when we make a commitment, when we give someone our word, when I was growing up, if you gave someone your word, that was better than a paper contract. We've lost some of that over the generations, and I'd love to see, our world, and especially our business world, get back to where you give someone your word and you make a commitment that it really still means something. And that's what I want my grandchildren and great grandchildren to take from this book, is that doing the right things and doing the right things every time ultimately will pay off in the long run. And that's the theme of this book, taking care of everything we touch.
I love it. Is Rick Ford, the book, The Growth Capital Playbook, How Smart Founders Find the Right Partner, Scale Fast, and Build What Lasts. Rick, it's been a real pleasure spending some time with you. Thank you so much. Good luck with the book. Good luck with the family office, and good luck with the family. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Joe. Have a great day.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Rick and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.